When both you and the narcissist go silent, the world does not calm down. It detonates because in that single moment, someone finally loses control, and it is not you. Most people think mutual silence means the story has reached its end, but the truth is far more unsettling. This is when the narcissist begins their real psychological spiral, and it is precisely when your true healing begins. Stay right here with me, because what happens next is the exact part no one ever prepares you for. If this scenario is already hitting uncomfortably close to home, keep listening closely. You need to understand the complex psychological terrain you are stepping onto right now, because knowing this hidden dynamic is how you break the toxic pattern permanently. Let us go much deeper into what really happens behind the scenes. When both of you stop contacting each other, the very first thing that unfolds on their side is what I call the recalibration phase. It is subtle, deeply psychological, and something most people completely miss because it occurs in total silence long before they ever make a move. When you go quiet, you register it as an emotional shift, a necessary boundary, and a brave step toward your personal healing. But the narcissist never interprets your silence in that healthy way. Instead, they take it purely as raw data. Your total lack of response becomes something they must decode immediately, not something they will ever respect. They begin to evaluate how they lost their grip over you rather than reflecting on how deeply they hurt you. Narcissists do not engage in self-reflection the way healthy individuals do. Instead, they carefully calculate whether you simply got distracted, if you are actively punishing them, if someone else entered the picture, or if you are testing them. They constantly hunt for the hidden angle, the secret motive, and the potential threat to their dominance. Your complete silence becomes an urgent puzzle they feel compelled to solve, primarily because unpredictability and uncertainty deeply destabilize them. During this recalibration period, they might not reach out to you at all. In fact, their quiet presence is not indifference. It is calculated strategy. They might secretly monitor your online activity, check in on your social circles, or observe who is currently interacting with you. They are actively gathering intelligence while waiting for your next emotional move. Narcissists firmly believe that anyone they once controlled will eventually come crawling back. Therefore, your silence is never interpreted as final closure, but rather as temporary, fragile resistance. This is precisely why they do not panic immediately. Instead, they hold back, fully assuming you will break the silence first, just as you have done so many times before. They rely heavily on the behavioral patterns they conditioned inside you, such as your guilt, your deep fear of conflict, and your endless hope for harmony. They fully expect you to fold under the pressure. However, when you do not bend, their recalibration grows far more intense. They start wondering whether their influence is slipping away forever, and that is the exact moment the threat becomes dangerously real to them. Silence in their world is never neutral. It is always either an opportunity to reestablish control or a direct threat to their fragile ego. The longer you stay quiet, the more they feel the ground shifting beneath them, because your steady silence completely disrupts the power dynamic they relied on for so long. When both sides fall completely silent, the internal emotional experience is dramatically different for you than it is for the narcissist. And this sharp contrast exposes an uncomfortable truth. You feel the deep weight of the loss, while they merely feel the frustration of an inconvenience. When you stop reaching out, you are usually carrying the full, crushing weight of everything that occurred between you. You are actively sorting through the emotional wreckage, the shattered trust, the lingering unanswered questions, and the sheer psychological exhaustion. You might experience profound sadness, withdrawal, overwhelming confusion, or even unfounded guilt. You are grieving not only the end of the relationship, but also the former version of yourself that tolerated far too much toxicity for far too long. Your decision to remain silent comes directly from emotional saturation. You have finally reached a point where your mind and body simply cannot endure any more chaos. You are fighting to reclaim your personal space, your dignity, and your mental clarity. That internal battle is incredibly heavy, taking a heavy toll on your sleep quality, your self-esteem, your daily memories, and your core sense of identity. Meanwhile, the narcissist does not process the quiet through any lens of emotional depth. They do not sit quietly with the loss the way you do, nor do they reflect on what went wrong, how deeply they damaged you, or what personal changes they need to make. Instead, their immediate reaction is entirely rooted in irritation and inconvenience. Your total silence disrupts their predictable daily routine, not their heart. They are accustomed to having continuous access to your undivided attention, your emotional reactions, your heartfelt apologies, your constant caretaking, and even your desperate arguments. Every single bit of that energy continuously fed their exaggerated sense of personal importance. When you go silent, that vital stream of validation suddenly turns off completely. This abrupt stoppage does not break them emotionally, it simply annoys them. They experience the sudden absence of your supply in the exact same way someone experiences losing access to a basic service they have depended on daily. It is merely a minor disruption, annoying delay, and a hassle. They are not sitting there thinking they lost someone truly meaningful. They are simply asking themselves why you are not responding to them anymore. Your profound pain and their minor inconvenience exist in two completely separate psychological universes. You are mourning the relationship while they are calculating their level of access. You are trying to rebuild your life while they calculate how your silence impacts their reputation. You feel the absolute emptiness inside, while they only feel the temporary interruption. As time moves forward, this massive difference becomes even clearer. You slowly start recognizing just how heavy that emotional burden truly was, and how much of your own voice you suppressed just to maintain a fragile peace. At the exact same time, they begin wondering why a tactic that used to work so effortlessly, your quick emotional responsiveness, has suddenly stopped functioning altogether. The massive imbalance becomes visible to everyone. Your steady silence forces you deeper into self-discovery and lasting healing, whereas it drives them straight into annoyance, bitterness, and an aggressive sense of entitlement. The heavy emotional weight you carry is real and profound, while the mild discomfort they experience is tied strictly to losing the convenience of your easy compliance. When both of you step back into absolute silence, the narcissist never views that quiet as a healthy pause or a shared step backward. They experience it as an aggressive, direct challenge to their inflated ego, because silence from a person they once controlled feels like outright rebellion. Narcissists view every human relationship strictly through a lens of power and dominance rather than genuine mutual respect. Therefore, when you stop responding, stop reaching out, and refuse to feed them attention, it completely shatters the psychological hierarchy they assumed they had permanently established over you. They interpret your deliberate silence as an act of hostility, even if your true intention was simply to protect your emotional sanity or regain basic clarity. In their skewed perspective, silence is never a neutral stance. It is viewed as active resistance, open disrespect, and clear evidence that their hold on you is fading away. This is precisely why complete silence impacts them far more deeply than any loud argument ever could. Heated arguments still grant them relevance and attention. Emotional reactivity constantly confirms their power over your state of mind. Even your anger reinforces their belief that they remain the absolute center of your universe. But complete silence completely removes them from the spotlight. That sudden removal threatens the carefully crafted illusion they rely on every single day to feel superior. Your quiet behavior forces them to confront the terrifying possibility that they are not nearly as indispensable, attractive, or powerful as they imagined. Narcissists absolutely cannot handle ambiguity, and your lack of communication creates an uncomfortable void they can neither control nor predict. Instead of viewing your silence as a healthy boundary, they treat it as an intentional provocation. This is when their inner thoughts turn increasingly bitter and distorted. They tell themselves that you are being ungrateful, childish, or manipulative. They assume your distance is merely a clever game designed to provoke a reaction from them. Their massive ego convinces them that your silence is just a strategic tactic, rather than a genuine sign of complete exhaustion and self-protection. Some narcissists quickly shift into a competitive mindset, viewing the quiet as a battle of wills that they must win at all costs. Others rewrite the narrative to frame themselves as the tragic victim, convincing their friends that you cruelly abandoned them. Even if they mistreated you for years, they will rewrite the meaning of your silence to shield their fragile self-image, never to understand your genuine pain. As this psychological tension builds up inside them, their sense of absolute control begins to crumble completely. Your quiet persistence acts like a mirror, reflecting their deepest insecurities. Rather than sitting with that deep discomfort, they start creating false stories that restore their feelings of superiority. They convince themselves that you will inevitably give in eventually because you always have in the past, or they begin planning subtle ways to punish you emotionally for failing to follow their script. In their world, your silence is a constant threat to their ego because it proves a reality they refuse to accept. You are no longer under their psychological spell. When both of you retreat into complete silence, something vastly different happens inside the narcissist compared to what happens inside you. For you, the quiet space might feel like a desperate room to breathe, process the past, and finally understand the heavy environment you managed to survive. But for the narcissist, your sudden absence creates an intense psychological vacuum that forces them to face something they spend their entire lives desperately avoiding: the complete loss of control over another person. They simply do not think in terms of peaceful distance or healthy boundaries. Instead, they view your total disengagement as a severe structural failure in the system they built to maintain their identity. Narcissists do not possess a stable internal sense of self-worth. Their entire self-esteem is constructed externally, held together by the reactions, validation, and emotional energy of the people surrounding them. You were an essential component of that external support system. Your emotional reactions, your predictable responses, and your habit of returning after toxic arguments all work together to validate their illusion of power. When you go completely silent, you break that cycle entirely. That unexpected interruption forces them into a rare moment of psychological vulnerability. It directly exposes their deep dependence on your engagement, a dependence they refuse to acknowledge even to themselves. They constructed a false narrative where they were the dominant figure calling all the shots. But your silence shatters that story completely. It signals that you have permanently walked away from the script they wrote for you, which severely destabilizes their managed identity. Without your reactions, they have nothing to manipulate, nothing to challenge, and no proof of their dominance. This absence becomes a massive threat, not because they care about you in a mature way, but because it dismantles the illusion that made them feel important. This is the exact moment when their internal state becomes deeply restless. They start replaying old interactions over and over, desperately searching for subtle clues they might have missed. They worry whether someone new has replaced them in your life. They begin scanning for ways to reassert control, even while maintaining their proud, quiet facade. The silence grows far louder and more unsettling for them than it does for you, simply because they have no idea what is happening on your side of the wall. That lack of visibility deprives them of their ability to predict your behavior. They are suddenly locked outside of your private world, no longer occupying the center of your attention, and that loss of central importance is intolerable for them. Their internal state rapidly shifts from arrogance to deep anxiety, from entitlement to intense suspicion, and from absolute certainty to complete chaos. All of this chaos is triggered by something as simple as your quiet absence. When both you and the narcissist retreat into total silence, it may appear from the outside as if nothing is happening, but internally, the narcissist begins moving through a predictable series of desperate behaviors designed to regain their lost control. One of their most common reactions is attempting to fill the void through tactics like hoovering, emotional baiting, or triangulation. These moves are not random acts, they are precise psychological tools used when they feel their influence slipping away. Hoovering occurs the moment they realize your silence is not just a brief phase. At first, they comfortably assume you will return because that is the habit they conditioned in you. But when you stay quiet, panic sets in. Hoovering is their attempt to drag you back into the toxic cycle. Not out of love, but because losing you threatens their ego stability. They might send a subtle text message, share a nostalgic memory, or bring up a fake crisis requiring your help. They might pretend to be reflective, deeply apologetic, or unusually soft, shifting their approach to whatever they think will break your resolve. Their underlying goal is never genuine reconnection, it is simply restoring their control. If hoovering fails to work, they quickly switch to aggressive baiting. Baiting is specifically designed to trigger a strong emotional response, whether positive or negative. Narcissists do not care what kind of emotion you express, as long as they are the direct cause of it. They might post provocative things on social media to make you jealous, send an insult to provoke an angry argument, or spark unnecessary drama. Any response from you instantly restores their feeling of power. Silence completely strips them of relevance. So baiting becomes their way of poking your wounds, hoping you will react just enough to prove you are still accessible. When those tactics fail, they escalate to triangulation, bringing a third person into the dynamic to rebuild their dominance. They might flaunt a new partner, hint that someone else appreciates them far more, or twist the narrative to make you look like the cruel villain. The entire goal of triangulation is to make you feel insecure, displaced, and desperate to compete for their attention. These desperate moves are not signs of genuine affection. They are absolute proof of their deep dependency on your attention. They rely entirely on external supply to maintain their identity, and when you withdraw that supply, they scramble to fix the damage. These behaviors are born out of fear, entitlement, and ego disruption, all triggered by your silence. As the silence stretches on, something profound unfolds that most people never expect. While you view the quiet as a path toward peace and true recovery, the narcissist experiences it as a growing sense of panic. Your silence is never interpreted as calm. It is seen as a terrifying loss of control. Because their sense of worth depends on external validation, your missing response triggers an internal alarm. Understanding that your peace is their panic is crucial for your journey. Narcissists rely heavily on emotional stimulation to maintain their fragile self-esteem. They constantly crave attention, admiration, or dramatic conflict to remain the focal point of your life. When you cut off that supply, their internal framework starts to crumble. They have no idea how to regulate their own emotions without outside feedback, and your quiet stance starves them of that validation. This sets off a chaotic chain reaction inside them. At first, they try to dismiss your silence, acting completely unbothered, cold, or relieved. But that display is merely a weak defensive shield. As days pass, the silence becomes impossible for them to ignore. Without your attention supporting their ego, they begin to feel invisible, ordinary, and irrelevant. These feelings are agonizing for them because they touch on their absolute worst nightmare, being completely unneeded and forgotten. While you use the quiet to gather strength, reclaim your independence, and heal your mind, they experience that same silence as a void destroying their identity. Your nervous system finally begins to calm down without the constant tension and unpredictable outbursts they brought into your life. The mental fog lifts, and you start recognizing your true worth again. You find profound clarity in the quiet, while they find mounting internal chaos. This sharp contrast grows more obvious as time goes on. They ruminate endlessly, replaying old moments and inventing reasons for your detachment because they miss the ego reflection you provided. Thus, while your silence heals your spirit, theirs slowly unravels their constructed facade. When the quiet finally settles, a remarkable transformation takes place inside you, often feeling slow, confusing, and profoundly relieving all at once. Your nervous system, which spent months or years in a state of constant high alert, finally gets the opportunity to stop preparing for the next sudden conflict. Relationships with narcissists create a state of continuous hypervigilance, where you learn to walk on eggshells, anticipating their moods and unpredictable outbursts. Your body becomes conditioned to expect danger even during moments of calm. Therefore, when complete silence begins, your system does not immediately relax. At first, you might feel restless, anxious, or unnerved by the lack of drama, interpreting the quiet as a sign of impending danger. That reaction is not weakness. It is a natural biological response from a body trained for survival. However, as the silence continues, the heavy fog begins to clear. Your mind untangles itself from the web of manipulation, and you notice how peaceful your thoughts become without the threat of their reactions. Your sleep improves, your focus returns, and you experience moments of deep stillness you have not felt in years. This is your nervous system resetting itself, realizing the threat has passed. This is the beginning of true emotional freedom, a recovery that requires zero permission, zero apologies, and zero closure from the narcissist. You are finally reclaiming the emotional energy that was once entirely consumed by their endless demands, fragile ego, and constant crises. You are rediscovering your ability to think independently, feel your emotions without judgment, and make decisions based on your true values, leaving their chaos behind for good.